Greetings, fellow armchair Imagineers. Tiki here.
And BlueDragonFive.
And tonight, we're talking Mr. Banks with a special second part of our three-act epic. That is our pitches for Walt Disney and Pixar biopics. Man, oh man, Dragon, these things have been in the works for so long. This is literally something where it's like, the Walt Disney movie that I'm pitching to you is something that I've literally had in my head since I was a teenager, like a movie going through all of Walt's life. So we're talking something that you've had in development for months with your Pixar thing, something that I have been thinking about for at least the good 10 years of my life at this point. And yeah, it's going to take more than one podcast to get through, but we're going to try and get through the individual acts as fast as we can. Dragon, do you want to set up anything about yours before we get into my pitch, or do you want to wait and set everything up after I'm done?
Yeah, you go first. I'll save all my stuff.
Okay. So, folks, my film actually let me
you give them a little refresher of like the main point of Act 1, like mainly where you left off.
Okay, let me first off switch to my root image here. Okay, my film is going to be starring Ryan Gosling as Walt Disney. It's going to be called either Uncle Walt or just Walt. I don't know. To tell you the truth, I'm leaning just towards Walt at this point, but we'll see. Just because my Dragon, whereas I feel like your story, while John Lasseter probably is the main character of your story, yours is much more of an ensemble piece. Mine is a very personal and intimate look into the man, the myth, the legend that is Walt Disney, with Ryan Gosling basically playing Walt Disney all the way from his from him as a young man in the 1920s all the way up until his death in 1966. So this is talking, we're talking like a good 40-year time span of Ryan Gosling playing Walt Disney, and of course makeup and all that is going to be in effect, especially in right now we're about hitting the point where it's going to kind of like sync up to where Ryan Gosling is kind of going to be he's going to be about the same age that Walt Disney is in the time that we're telling the story right now in Act 2. In Act 3, we're definitely going to have to, get some makeup effects for Gosling to age him up a little bit to play the basically the the Disneyland like Tom Hanks era Walt Disney. But for now, let's get into, as Dragon said, let's recap the first act. Now, there were a few main players in the first act. Of course, we have Ryan Gosling as Walt Disney. Walt Disney, of course, in this movie, characterized a lot by his ambition, but also by his kind of, he's got a few defining characteristics in this film that I've kind of taken from different biographies that I've read about the man and also documentaries and stuff. He doesn't take criticism well. He wants, of course, his best quality, which is something that's going to be on display, is his, his big ambition and his ability to dream big. But that's going to clash with his inability to take criticism, and also with his, he kind of struggles with the everyman. He's always sort of had kind of his head in the clouds in a lot of ways, and he struggles when it comes to sort of working with the common people, which we'll see as the act plays out. Speaking of the common people, probably one of the big defining storylines that's going to take a backseat in Act 2, I want to mention. Works is not going to come back into play until Act 3, which is appropriate because that fits in the time frame, because Works didn't come back to the Disney studios until the 1950s with 101 Dalmatians, where he invented the Xerox process. But I digress. Works played in this film by Dan Fogel, who played the main American character in Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, which is what kind of drew me to him for Works. Basically, the main point of drama in Act 1 is Walt Disney sort of taking what he and Ub came up with together in the design of Mickey Mouse after some trials and tribulations leading up to the design of Mickey Mouse with the loss of Oswald and everything like that. And basically, Walt kind of takes the design that the two of them came up with, creates an empire for himself, and gets so into his own head that he changes the name of the studio from the Disney Brothers Studio to the Walt Disney Studio, much to the chagrin of his brother Roy, played by Michael Keaton. And so basically the big dramatic endpoint, of course, we've also got Art Babbitt, who's going to be the head of the Strikers in Act 2. Art Babbitt, played by Jeremy Renner, one of the lead animators in the early days of the studio, kind of around the Snow White era.
And really good casting so far, by the way. It's all really good.
Yeah,
casting.
Keaton, Gosling, Jeremy Renner. Of course, we have Scarlett Johansson playing Walt's wife, who's going to have an interesting role to play in Act 2 because Walt's wife is kind of like at the center of the studio drama in a lot of ways.
Because the woman behind the man is very crucial, very important. Like in the third act for me, Nancy Lasseter, she's going to have a very important role.
Sure. And let's see, I guess the only other thing to set up is that the end of Act 1 was Walt being super ambitious about Snow White. Snow White's about to come out. Basically quits the studio because of the way that Walt's been treating his employees. He says that he's gotten way too into his own head. And Walt basically is screaming at Ub as he walks out after crushing a cigarette in Ub's coffee. Very unclassy move on Walt's part. We have a great line, and this is going to transition us into Act 2. All right, Dragon? We have a great line where Walt's calling, all right, you go, Ub. You go, leave. You see? And this movie, it's going to win Oscars. It's going to win Oscars, Ub. Oscars. And then we cut, Dragon. We cut to Walt Disney's office, and we see the seven little Oscars.
Yeah.
We cut to sometime later.
Right. Nice.
It's going to win Oscars, Ub.
Oscars, plural.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. So this is where we get into Act 2. Act 2 starts with the Burbank Studios in the glory days. You know, this is after the move to Burbank, after, you know, basically this is kind of where the studio is kind of a campus. It's a great place to work, and Walt is sort of you know, he's the guy who's definitely heading the ship at this point, and everyone does sort of look up to and respect him. That's, of course, going to change as we get in through the act, because this act is all about the strike, so we'll go through it. Of course, Walt's smoking a cigarette in his office. Roy walks in. He's questioning the budgets of Fantasia and Pinocchio, which are in production at the same time. Walt's getting super ambitious and saying, you know, there's no way that people aren't going to recognize what they're trying to do with it. He's especially proud of Fantasia. He's like, that Fantasia picture, Roy, I'm telling you, it's a game changer. And Michael Keaton, he's like, well, yeah, Walt, but do you think it's too much of a game changer? I mean, the movie houses, they don't want to house this Fantasound. Well, that's their problem then. If they don't want to house the Fantasound, then they can't get Walt Disney's Fantasia. So you see the dilemma here. Like, Walt is very much up his own, he's up his own britches. So we get a cameo, Dragon. We get a cameo. And look, I'm not a fan of this guy's music. I just want to point that out. I just think from the pop culture perspective, I just think this is fun to slip in. So we've got Walt Disney walking into the recording booth as the soundtrack for Fantasia is being composed, of course, by none other than Leopold Stokowski. And Leopold Stokowski, Dragon, is being played by none other than Mr. Skrillex.
Oh God! Let me see the Leopold again. Okay, let me see the other guy. I gotta tell you, Tiki, I'm not thrilled with this casting. It's no Jeremy Renner, but you know.
Look, he doesn't even have any lines. Okay, he's literally just in the background, and for music fans, they can be like, Skrillex, like he's like a modern day music guy.
I think you might have. What's that? That's the Game of Thrones controversy going on right now. What's that? Ed Scarin? Is that the guy?
Oh, I don't know. I'm the furthest from Game of Thrones stuff. You can't throw Game of Thrones stuff my way.
All right.
But yeah, so like I said, it's just a fun, like, for the Skrillex fans out there gonna get hip with the, today's kids. But anyway, so the point of the scene is they're conducting specifically the Rite of Spring segment. And we're hearing, and Walt's kind of, he's doing sort of the Hitchcock thing where he's sort of conducting along to the music as Stokowski's doing the real conducting. And the Rite of Spring, of course, is the the one with the dinosaurs, and we're in the section at the very beginning, the da 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 da, and Walt, he's just getting really, really into the idea of the animation mixing with the music and everything. So flash forward to the Fantasia premiere, Dragon, and this is actually something that's true. This was, believe it or not, the first time that not only was Fantasia a box office flop, thanks in most part to the fact that Walt refused to play the film in houses that wouldn't put in his Fantasound, which was essentially kind of like an early predecessor to surround sound. And also, this was the first time that Walt Disney was dealing with a real critical failure as well. Because there were some people that got Fantasia at the time, but Fantasia is very much a movie that kind of grew into its iconic stature. It was very much a movie that's ahead of its time, for sure. And this film demonstrates that. So Walt, of course, he's not taking the bad reviews well. He's Walt Disney, pretentious? I'll show you, pretentious. And now, Dragon, you're gonna like this. You're gonna like this. So much as the last scene was against the Rite of Spring, this scene with Walt Disney going, he's basically fuming, right? Like he's chain smoking cigarettes. He's just on a rant about the critics.
Yeah.
And it's set against Night on Bald Mountain.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the music's timed where he'll like crush cigarettes into the ashtray, like
right.
did it. And so Art Babbitt, he's seen Walt kind of fuming on the sidelines, and Walt is basically blaming the animators for the failure of Fantasia. And this is where kind of like a breaking point starts to hit. And of course, Art Babbitt not happy. Now, look, if we went through with all the animators at the studio at the time, that's why I just didn't cast them. I'm sure we can get some cameos from like modern day animators in there playing some of the 9 Old Men, stuff like that. That'd be a good opportunity to have some cameos. But other than that, like I said, I wanted to focus mostly on Art Babbitt since he's the head of the strike.
I'm sold on Babbitt being the face of the strike. That's all fine. Essentially, that's kind of how it was anyway. So
All right, so scene 12, we get a scene of Walt in bed with Lillian, and Lillian is telling Walt about a new artist at the studio, Mary Blair. And let's get to the casting of Mary Blair, Dragon. Sorry, give me one moment. Now, I said I wasn't going to cast this person as Mary Blair, but you know what?
Yes!
Because it's a better role. It's a better role than because what I originally had is I originally had Vera Farmiga in basically like a small role as Walt Disney's daughter in like the later act. But no, this is a much better role for Vera Farmiga.
The one, look at that angel, folks. Look at her. She's
God.
She's been spared. She's been spared to us from God. This woman. She's so talented.
Okay. So essentially, Dragon, here's the interesting thing about Lillian Disney in the strike.
Yeah.
Is that one of the interesting things about the strike is that the female workforce at the studio, who was kind of neglected to the ink and paint department, they were some of the most vocal against Walt and the low pay and everything like that. And they were kind of some of the biggest supporters of Art Babbitt. And Art Babbitt was really sort of the one who was vocalizing kind of like the, the pressure that Walt was putting on everyone, and that being kind of a poisonous work environment. And, of course, the pay, too. Because the thing about Art Babbitt was well paid, but he was looking out for the little guy.
Yeah.
Because I have a speech by Walt that's coming up that actually kind of illustrates Walt's view on the wages.
Which, of course, he felt really betrayed by Babbitt because, of course, he treated him well and he did this to him. It's like
exactly. So basically, you get the interesting thing with Lillian then, because Lillian started out in the ink and paint department, and she's at this point in the story, she's kind of moved on to being a housewife. We see we see their daughters. There's a ton of the thing about Walt Disney's life. There's a ton of stuff to focus on. Like, I could make a movie completely around him adopting Sharon Disney. You know what I mean? And Walt raising an adopted daughter. But we can't focus on everything. We have to sideline some things, and that's unfortunately one of the things that's going to be sidelined. That's who Vera Farmiga would have played, by the way, as an adult Sharon Disney. But so my point is, you see, kind of like I'm trying to give Lillian Disney some relevance in the story, and that she's, this is something that's kind of like happening to the female workforce at the studio that Lillian very much represents. So she's kind of in the middle of it. So, anyways, basically, there's also a news broadcast on the radio. Kind of just an exposition, conveniently, like, oh, and by the way, folks, war is verging on the U.S. The U.S. is pressured to enter the war. Will it happen? So this is like pre-Pearl Harbor, probably the same year that Pearl Harbor happened, just, before December. And Walt, he's just really stressed out about the tensions. He's mentioning that if the war does happen, it'll cut off the funding to the studio because they won't be able to distribute films, internationally. So tensions are high. So next scene is the next day at the studio. And oh boy, Dragon, I think this scene is one of the most haunting scenes. And this is straight out of real life, all right? Because I've actually heard recorded audio of Walt. And this is where he gathers all 1,300 of his employees into the biggest theater in the studio. The only one that could house all 1,300 employees.
I remember this. Go on, tell me.
And he basically issues a big speech about, like being treated with respect and everything. And so here's the speech, Dragon. Here's the speech. I'll do it.
This did not go over well.
No, it did not. Some people think that we have class distinction in this place. They wonder why some people get better seats in the theaters than others. I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm doing Walt as just like stereotypical like 1930s news broadcaster. I'm just gonna
Can you believe it, folks?
Right. They wonder why some men get spaces in the parking lot and others don't. I've always felt and always will feel that the men who contribute the most to the organization should, out of respect alone, get more privileges. If you're not progressing as you should, instead of grumbling and growling, you should do something about it. And as you said, Dragon, this does not go over well. Like, basically, the ironic thing is that this was meant to be kind of like a rousing sort of like, you can do it if you want to, if you want the respect, you got to earn it. Gosh darn it. Pull yourself up by the bootstraps and do something about it. But it does not go over well at all. So then we have scene 13, the introduction to Frank and Ollie, who Dragon, basically Frank and Ollie, the best way to describe them in this movie is that they basically serve as kind of like the same role that the Coen brothers served in, the Sherman brothers.
There you go.
The Sherman brothers served in Saving Mr. Banks.
That's the sequel.
Yes. Where they're basically kind of like Walt's confidants, like, Walt, like they're not going to cross Walt, I don't paint them in a negative light, but I paint them in a light where they're kind of both intimidated and have too much respect for Walt to cross the picket line. So let's do the casting.
Hold it, Tiki. When is this happening? I'm sorry. So you're saying you're paying them in like the Sherman brothers, right? Then I actually did.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just want to clarify that.
I'm saying like the role that the Sherman brothers had in Saving Mr. Banks, like that's basically the role that these guys have in.
Gotcha.
Okay, so Dragon unfortunately cannot find a high quality picture of these guys when this movie's supposed to be taking place, so you just have to use your imagination. Yeah. And we are casting America's Sweethearts.
Oh God. Oh jeez. Well,
it works. I honestly think it works. Ben Stiller is Frank Thomas. Owen Wilson is Ollie Johnston. I honestly think it works.
I'm not opposed to it. I'm not opposed to it like I am the one guy Stokowski, but I can see. I can kind of see mainly Ben Stiller's Frank Thomas. I can buy it. I have to be.
I can see Owen Wilson with like the Ollie Johnston mustache.
Again, I'm not off to. I'd give it a shot. I'd give it a shot.
Okay. And also, while we're here, Dragon, let's. This guy is only going to have a couple scenes in the background. He's kind of going to be a comic relief foil, but let's cast the idiot nephew. The idiot nephew, Roy E. Disney, will be played by the Flash himself, Ezra Miller.
Oh, hey! All right,
Yeah,
let me see Roy again. Let me think about it. Let me see Roy. All right. Okay, let me see Ezra. Huh. I can buy a young one. I could buy that. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Oh.
That's I can't imagine that one, but okay.
No. We'll get to that. I'm sorry. I just wanted to check if I had any other casting stuff. Yeah, we'll get to Basket.
All right.
So yeah, Roy Disney, he's basically just kind of got a couple comic relief scenes, just kind of like, stumbling around the studio, doing errands and stuff, basically being an intern at the studio.
Not bad. I'm liking this so far. Ezra is kind of the impetuous nephew in a way.
And of course, these guys, like I said, they're going to be kind of Walt's confidants, sort of the, like I said, they're going to play their performances both with a mix of fear and respect to Walt as they address him.
Certainly, Owen with a mustache. I got it.
Okay. Yes, Owen Wilson with the mustache. All right. So yeah, the picket line is starting to form outside the studio. Art Babbitt is leading it. Mary Blair is actually one of the few holdover female employees who is not on the picket line. And instead, she was actually inspired by Walt, through his speech about picking yourself up by the bootstraps and everything. She actually saw what Walt was what Walt was talking about. Like, yeah, you're right, Mr. Disney. If I want to succeed in the studio, I'm going to have to develop my own style, and that's what I'm here to do. And this leads to Mary Blair working with Tyrus Wong and developing her style on Bambi. And Bambi, of course, is a very naturalistic film. This is before we get to the very colorful and splashy, like Alice in Wonderland Mary Blair. Anyways, Dragon, so there's so as Bambi is finishing up production, and Bambi is very costly, Dumbo comes out and is a great success, but unfortunately Bambi is also a flop. Now, Bambi's a critical success, which pleases Walt, but at the same time, basically Bambi flopping kind of made the success of Dumbo irrelevant and sort of put the studio in a bit of a hole. And now we also have a scene in the screening room where there's a scene, the scene where Bambi is fighting off the two stags.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's contrasted with Walt and Roy. Walt and Roy are arguing about Walt.
I like that. It's good.
Yeah. They're like, Roy, I need to get out of here, and you've been a better businessman than I have all my life, and you need to take care of Babbitt. You hear me? You need to do something about Babbitt. In the meantime, I'm Walt Disney, gosh darn it, and there's a war going on, and people in other countries are asking Walt Disney to come to these countries to cheer them up. And Roy, I'm an American citizen. It's my calling, Roy. So this is, of course, leading to the famous South America trip. Roy Disney is kind of, and Michael Keaton, poor Michael Keaton, he's like, well, Walt, it's like Art. He's got this whole commission, like, just breathing down my neck. What do you expect me to do? Well, that's Roy, you're the baking type. I'm sure you could do it much more with me out of your hair. So this is kind of a cocky move on Walt Disney, essentially, to be like, yeah, South America wants me to come. I'm going to do my American duty and go to basically take a trip to South America on the country's dime, bring a bunch of my animators, and, leave my brother with the responsibility of dealing with the strike. So, of course, as the film goes on, the rift between Walt and Roy, it's, Walt and Roy, they loved each other, but at the same time, it was always kind of a power battle between the two of them. So
that's interesting. I kind of remember that going a different way.
What do you mean?
I could have sworn I was in one of the PBS Disney thing, American Experience. I could have sworn it was Disney. He was like really getting into with the riot. With the the strike. I don't know what I'm saying, right? Basically, he's really getting into it with the strikers, and then basically Roy's the one to kind of usher him like, hey, well, why don't you take a breather? You go to South America, take some amers, goodwill mission, that sort of thing. He did that to get him out of the way, so he didn't make things worse. That's how I thought it went.
I mean, you could be right, Dragon, but gosh darn it, I'm telling a movie here.
All right, artistic liberty.
I'm taking some dramatic liberties.
I'm just saying, just like specify that's
okay.
Artistic liberty. All right, do whatever you will.
I just think it's more interesting to have Walt kind of like have the hubris to be like, they're calling me. Gosh darn it, you might be right. I think you are right, but all right. So Dragon, we have the South America trip, which is basically just a montage. We have Frank Thomas, Ollie Johnston, and Mary Blair being the three central focuses here. We have them arriving in Rio de Janeiro, lots of splashes of color, maybe some traditional 2D animation, kind of like Walt and Mary and Frank and Ollie, kind of like, maybe in a cartoon, some really surrealist stuff, because this is kind of like an artistic awakening for both Walt and, more importantly, Mary Blair.
Oh, yeah, I'm down for that. Formiga and animation in South America. That's
Oh, yeah.
All the right bits right there. It's like, oh, man, that's so interesting. Go on.
Okay. I'm glad you like it. So
again, I like that it kind of informs the Alice in Wonderland. It was really clever.
Right. So, yeah. And, of course, Lillian and Sharon are also on the trip, just to point that out.
Yeah.
Anyways, Roy is left in charge of the studio, and of course, because he's not a man of such hubris, you are right. There is some truth to the fact that Walt Disney being gone gives Roy a better chance to kind of sort things out for now. And things are kind of agreed upon on the strike, but on shaky terms. And the thing is that it establishes that Art Babbitt creates a union for the animators. And so basically Babbitt holds all the power. Like, they'll go back to working with him, but if anything goes out of line, then there's going to be trouble. So, all right. So tensions are still high. And meanwhile, Mary Blair is kind of changing her style up a little bit. We see her starting to work on the little golden books, kind of the first stepping stones to the Alice designs. Let me see. This is at the point where the war starts to enter the studio, and we see the U.S. Army basically overtake the studio and use it as a headquarters. So basically, we're going from there being a personal war on the studio with the strike to a literal war. And Walt he's trying his best. He's really trying his best to to focus on his family at this point. He's also trying to go into different ventures with the studio. Since animation is really costly, he wants to kind of return to his roots with a mix of live action and animation, which gives way to, of course, Zippity-doo-dah. I just spoiled the casting. I'm sorry. So James Baskett, of course, who played Uncle Remus in Song of the South, played by the great James Earl Jones.
That is great casting.
Yeah, you got to admit, that's pretty damn spot on. Okay, so here's, this is kind of like just an interesting little historical nugget that I threw in there. This is kind of a late addition. I want to point that out. This is kind of a late addition to the story, but I just found I just found this story so fascinating, and it kind of had the right bite to it to really fit in with the narrative here. So basically, the story is that Song of the South was very divisive among critics because it was a beautifully made movie, but of course, we all know the controversies with Song of the South, and these aren't just modern day, like PC controversies. We're talking Song of the South was a controversial movie back then, back when it was first released. And of course, Dragon, one of the things that did not help this controversy was what I want to kind of lay out. The reason why James Earl Jones is there is Song of the South premiered in a movie theater in Atlanta, Georgia, and according to Georgia law, African Americans were not allowed in certain movie theaters, including the one that Song of the South premiered in. So it was still a segregated community, and basically the main star of Song of the South was barred from his own premiere.
Oh, that's tragic.
Yeah, isn't it? Yeah. So that's just kind of like a little bite that I wanted to get in there for the, just because it's too dramatic to pass up, I think. And it also kind of shows Walt. Like, what I want to illustrate here is Walt is not a racist. And I feel like that's, of course, been an unfair criticism lobbed at him over the years. Like, kind of
he's not exactly a civil rights advocate.
Walt is he's old fashioned.
That's the thing. I mean, he's not condemning, but he's not necessarily.
He's also kind of in this instant. He's also just sort of he's kind of clueless. You know what I mean? He's
right.
This is a good example of white privilege at the end of the day, because Walt did grow up with he didn't grow up in the most wealthy family. He did grow up, of course, in an era of segregation and hard racism, not having to experience any of those things, which, of course, that's something that all white people kind of have to deal with in their own way in this culture. Don't want to get too much into that. But so you get what I'm trying to say, though. It's not that Walt hated black people or anything. It's that he didn't really understand their plight.
All right.
So, oh gosh darn it, Dragon. This reminds me, I probably should have had like a Floyd Norman subplot in there somewhere. Again, there's like so many subplots to grasp, right? Like, I probably should have had Floyd Norman in there somewhere.
I mean, I hope you're going somewhere with this. I mean, that Floyd Norman seems to be like kind of the best payoff for that sort of thing right there. Like, oh man, that could be,
The only thing I'm going with it is the fact that the controversy over Song of the South and the racism stuff, it really kind of sent Walt into a personal tailspin where he's basically the whole point of Act 2 is that we start Act 2 in sort of the college campus setup with the studio, whereas now Act 2 is kind of like, it's kind of winding down into a bit of a war zone.
Ah, okay. That's clever. Okay.
But we do get a little bit of a reprieve, Jag. We do get a little bit of a reprieve because we get a famous scene that, in my opinion, might be one of the most important Disney moments ever, a personal moment that led to a genius idea. We get, of course, the moment where Walt is taking his daughters out to Griffith Park, sitting on the carousel.
Oh.
And of course, he's in the midst of all the, all the studio turmoil and everything, and he's, he's just thinking to himself, you don't need any dialogue, right? You just see him sitting at the carousel on the famous bench, looking up at his daughters, basically a recreation of some of those old photos of Walt at that bench. And you just see the glimmer in his eye. You see the shine in his eye. And, of course, Act 3 is going to be kind of centered around Disneyland, so we'll get back into that a little later, kind of winding up Act 2. Let me see. Okay, yeah. Okay, so meanwhile, the war is over, Dragon. Even though Lillian is stressed out over bills because Walt, this is kind of like the founder thing, right? Where Walt had to take out personal money in order to salvage the studio on Cinderella, because Cinderella was the film that basically saved the studio in a lot of ways.
Yeah, but Walt didn't realize that he's not in the animation business; he's in the real estate business.
Oh, God.
Kidding. Go on. No, continue. I'm joking. Continue.
Okay, so basically, and the point in with the studio production stuff, like we'll see on the sidelines, we see that they're making the package films like Ichabod and Mr. Toad and Melody Time and stuff, and while they're not necessarily losing money, they're not making money either, and especially with the wartime and films not being distributed overseas and the war kind of taking up a bunch of the studio's resources, times are very, very tight at Disney. And, and the third act basically ends with the success of Cinderella, much in the same way that Act 2 ends with the success of Snow White, or at least the inevitable success of Snow White.
I think you mean Act 1 and Act 2. You said 2 and 3.
What?
Act 1 ended with Snow White, right?
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm sorry. You get what I mean.
Yeah, I get you. Just want to clarify. Okay.
Okay, so basically the act ends up where Cinderella becomes a huge hit, and the studio is celebrating, and we see this great divide. We see this great divide that we end on, this really dramatic divide where Art Babbitt is kind of like on the sidelines, and he's sort of shaking his head, and sort of like, what is Walt doing? Because basically what is happening is that Walt is throwing a private party in his office with some of the 9 old men and then Mary Blair and people like that. and he's leaving the studio people out of it. Like he's leaving, you know, the staff out of this private party. And so, of course, this is kind of like a dramatic divide of like, okay, what, you know, like Walt is getting, like, while Walt's success might be at the height, his personal standing might be at a low point with his employees. That's kind of where we end it.
Okay.
All right. I hope you like some of that.
No, I liked it. Honestly, if it were me, I'm not criticizing you for it. For me, I would have hit the Dumbo role a little bit more. But on the whole, I mean, I enjoyed it. I mean, honestly, what I would have done, I would have maybe, again, but when you brought the Floyd Norman thing, it made me think, you know, I think basically, if it were me, I would have gotten rid of the maybe the song in the South that had more Dumbo in. If I were like kind of bait and switch a little bit, but if you had the Floyd Norman thing, I'd say absolutely keep the Uncle Remus thing. But, you know.
Yeah, like I said, I really wanted to keep Floyd Norman in, but if Floyd Norman was going to be in the story, he would have basically occupied the
I mean, I understand
Mary Blair, which would be the young protege. You know,
exactly. Which I completely understand why you didn't include Norman. I'm just saying, I just would have liked to see a little bit more of the Dumbo and the Strike kind of rise up a little bit more, but. I mean, yeah, and as is though. I mean, it's still really strong. And again, like the ending on the war zone of the studio instead of like kind of happy college campus in the beginning. So that's good.
All right.
Okay, so folks, I'm gonna go by mine as quickly as possible because essentially we're both kind of doing Chaplin in terms of like kind of what biopics we're doing here. Well, Chaplin's not a short movie.
right.
Okay, just to quickly recap the main just kind of bullet points of Act 1. Again, on the whole, this is of course it's a Pixar biopic. It's not just about John Lasseter, but John Lasseter is the driving force. You know, it's very much based on the Pixar story. It's kind of what the timeline is, like kind of the now is leading up to like where the Pixar story is. It's also kind of a loose adaptation of an autobiography. Of basically a book on Pixar, the Pixar Touch by David A. Price. So a lot of stuff mainly from those two sources. On the whole, it's basically kind of like how does Pixar become the next Disney, and how does John Lasseter become the next, well, Disney himself. That's kind of like, it's kind of a reflective journey where kind of this company, we get to see it from the ground up, kind of intimidate the giant that is the Disney animation studio in a way, and kind of become welcomed into it. So it's kind of like you're kicked out in the beginning because we start this Act 1. John Lasseter, it's a flashback in a current day. The current day is that they're on the rocks with Disney. It's like during the big contract breakdowns of Steve Jobs and Michael Eisner really having at it. Basically. Sorry, I was trying to phrase that better. Essentially, this is like during the Circle 7 stuff. In the present, the Circle 7 stuff, we see a John Lasseter
with shitty direct-to-video sequels.
Exactly, and I'm building there with Act 3.
Okay.
Just give me a little tease of that, I guess, now. But the point is, that's the framing device. We have the present, which is John Lasseter, and the climate of Pixar being really unsure. It's like Pixar's kind of scared in the present. Like, they don't know what's going to happen. This is right between, like, the solution to the contract. It's like in that period of what you don't know what's going on. We know a lot of bad stuff's been happening. You don't know how it's going to be solved, so everyone's just kind of, like, chasing their tails, and John Lasseter, he's just exhausted by dealing with all this. He just wants to make movies.
Right.
And it's pretty linear in the flashbacks. Majority of it's in flashback where we just see John Lasseter, him getting fired from Disney. That's how we open it on, making a promise with Joe Ramp, to direct the first animated film. He'll direct John Lasseter's first animated film. We see him go from CalArts to the forming of Lucasfilm, to the forming of early Pixar. Steve Jobs and Ed Catmull, they're very big players in it. Of course, the scientist, the entrepreneur, and John Lasseter, the artist. And Pixar was in really bad shape and looks like they're going to be closed down because they're losing $1 million a year until they finally brokered a deal with Disney. They finally brokered a deal to make the first full-length computer animated film, which essentially is all their dreams come true, and they're looking very forward to it. Let's see. So, yes, that's where we left that one, Judd. John Lasseter, he called Joe Ramp saying, "Joe, we're making a movie." He's so excited, like, "Oh, we're making a movie finally. Our dreams are going to come true."
A sequel.
Well, no, we're doing the first one, doing the first Toy Story.
Yeah, I know.
Anyway. All right, so without further ado, essentially, again, Act 2 mainly revolves around the brain trust as we see him here at this point in time. That's the majority of this. So this is them during the 1990s when they're making Toy Story. You can see behind them the Green Army Man sequence, which is a very pivotal moment in Act 2. So the majority is like we had our brain trust meet each other at the very end of Act 1, so now these are our main guys in Act 2, and we're going to see them grow into Act 3 and everything. So these are our main guys for the majority of the movie. Okay.
All right, let's do it.
Okay, so Act 2. So again, we end on a really jovial note of Act 1. Act 2 opens with a very kind of like worrisome note that parallels the present as well. So Steve Jobs, this is 1991. Steve Jobs is telling Ed Catmull, and let's show what those guys look like. So it was, of course, what Steve Jobs and Ed Catmull look like relatively around 2006, which is kind of where kind of the main setting is. So let's see who we got cast as him. So Ed Catmull, just a little refresher real quick, is Michael Gill, known as Gideon Goddard himself on Mr. Robot. He's our Ed Catmull, a really good actor. And for Steve Jobs, we have Michael Strahlberg, another great actor from the Steve Jobs movie.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of an ironic pull.
I finally get to play the man himself. I'm moving on up in the world.
Basically, because I think if he fits the more of the younger Steve Jobs you're kind of going with here, and again, majority of the flashbacks. So
I need to watch that movie again.
It really movie. It really holds up on the rewatch. It's such a well-constructed. Anyway, let's not get down the rabbit hole. The point is, so we open with a conversation between Steve Jobs and Ed Catmull, and basically, and this is, of course, I was very factual with all this stuff, by the way. So Steve Jobs basically saying to Ed in the conversation, I don't trust his contract, because essentially Disney kind of screwed over Pixar at the initial contracts, basically saying, and Steve's just voicing this ad, like he's kind of giving a little exposition of what this contract implies, saying Disney has sequel rights, which means they have the right to do direct-to-video sequels with or without Pixar. And the important thing that Steve Jobs is stressing here is that Disney can pull the plug at any moment on this production, which puts us back at square one. So if they don't like the smell of something, they could can the movie, and we get compensation for it. But we're gonna still not be any closer to making a full-length animated movie like we all want to do. Mm-hmm. So we have that kind of umbrella at the beginning of this. So there was always that dangerous ticking clock that Disney holds all the power here. So you got to be a little wary of them. Okay, Jeffrey Katzenberg tells. Jeffrey Katzenberg, of course, played by the wonderful and talented, the guy who kind of inspired all this, Stanley Tucci.
Yes, he did inspire all this.
Yep. Oh yeah, even got glasses, looking a little bit like. But yeah, so basically, what we have here, Stanley Tucci, Jeffrey Katzenberg. He's telling John Lasseter, I need a script so we can get to work on this thing. I need a script so you guys can go in production. Now, the main two guys from Disney are kind of our mouthpieces for Disney. Again, we didn't tell every single corporate executive. Like Peter Schneider, I kind of kept him out of things. Like he was mentioned once in the first act, and he's kind of obscured in this a little bit. But he's a little complicated. I don't want to say anything bad about Peter Schneider, but things were complicated in the '90s, folks. Anyway, the point is, so it's Jeffrey Katzenberg and it's Tom Schumacher. Tom Schumacher looks a little something like this, of course. And Tom Schumacher is played by G. Bonner Ribisi. He's a really good actor. I like that casting myself.
I do too.
And essentially, the dynamic is Tom Schumacher in this very scene. In fact, he tells John Lasseter, he's the very supportive advocate of Pixar. He's like really rooting for these guys because he loves the cap system which Pixar developed. He loves pushing the technological barriers of what Disney can do because he was the thing. He was so crestfallen when Rescuers Down Under underperformed because he was hoping that was going to be the first fully caps animated.
Rescuers Down Under, the cap stuff in that movie is incredible. It still holds up to this day.
Of course, there was a famous scene in there where Jeffrey Katzenberg called, and that's why I paired these guys together. By the way, where he called him and said, Tom was like almost crying on the phone over the how basically that. And Jeffrey Katzenberg kind of reassured him, and a real nice kind of compassion moment. Jeffrey Katzenberg saying, "Tom, we're going to move on. We're going to go forward." So that's really why I paired these two together. Tom Schumacher's
I just want the audience to picture this guy saying that.
Yes, that's the thing. So basically, Tom. That's how these two go hand in hand. Tom Schumacher, he's the intermediary. He's the guy who's going to go to Pixar now and again, deliver the notes and stuff. And he's going to be like, I'm rooting for you guys. And Jeffrey Katzenberg, of course, is kind of more, he's the businessman of the two. Mm-hmm. He's a more kind of strong-hearted businessman. Okay, so the brain trust assembles. Brain trust assembles as you see before them. And now this is my favorite part of Act 2. My favorite part of the whole pitch, honestly. I was looking forward to this. This is where we get a lot of my favorite stuff in this whole thing. So the brain trust assembles to write and figure out, the working title Toy Story, basically what their first movie is going to be. which they know is a Tin Toy Christmas special, which they now have gotten the okay to make it a full-length film. So basically a Tin Toy movie right now called Toy Story. So what we're going to do in these sequences, and basically a lot of these are montages. So we're going to have we're going to circle around them like sitting in a group like they'd love to do. And we're going to show the passage of
I feel
time.
like a lot of my stuff was montage too. I just didn't explain it very well. I just want to put that out there.
Yeah, think Better Call Saul with a lot of these montages they got going on here. It's kind of one of the things I love from the Pixar story, honestly, just in terms of editing that. I love that we got to see kind of a change in shirt because, of course, the guys at Pixar, I love their choices of shirt, especially John Lasseter has like.
Oh my god, I can totally picture like a flash. Like a flash of all the different Lasseter shirts over different days.
So very similar to the inflatables. Yeah, very similar to the inflatable thing from Better Call Saul, the inflatable sequence of the Better Call Saul kind of suits and all the multicolors.
Oh yeah, we need a time lapse shot of all the Hawaiian shirts.
So essentially, here's what we do in these sequences. We're going to jump around for the idea. We're not these all. Them talking things over doesn't necessarily go like linearly. That we're going to jump from conversation to conversation in a scene like this. We're going to edit it together like it's one scene. You understand?
Yeah.
And the way we show that is like seeing them change positions where they're sitting, and also the shirts will change constantly. So conversations from different days.
Okay.
Building together, so we just literally tell the idea as fast as possible. So here's the breakdown of how these guys work. So Joe Ranft is the artist. Pete Docter, he is he's the animator, and he's questioning the practicalities. And Pete Docter's the guy who asks the smart questions in the group. Andrew Stan's the writer. He's taking down the ideas. He's kind of turning into a narrative. And John Lasseter, of course, is the idea man. That's how this group of people work.
Okay.
So let's see. Okay, so let's see. Pete Docter, he puts in a VHS tape of Tin Toy because he has to see how this thing's practically going to work from an animation standpoint. So we have Tin Toy, like a little TV in the room. There's a whiteboard, like a little whiteboard that Andrew Stan's kind of writing on. And of course, we have a historic moment from the history of Toy Story about to play out in 1 millisecond here. Joe Ranft, it has a drawing pad, and this is another device in these montages where basically we get to see the scenes unfold as they're describing what they're looking for. So basically Joe Ranft is drawing it. We get to see storyboards and images of what the characters look like.
Oh, sorry, do you want to go through the casting of these people?
Oh, yes, real quick. Basically, this root image will serve this a lot, so Okay, folks, so let's see. Going through the casting. So we have Justin Swain as John Lasseter.
Yeah.
As young John Lasseter. We have, as young Joe Ranft, we have Rainn Wilson.
I think I lost the Justin Swain picture. My bad.
No, that's it. It's just Justin Swain.
Oh, it is? Then I think I lost the young Lasseter picture then.
No, we didn't have a young Lasseter picture.
Oh, okay.
We used him as in the... You're all good.
Okay,
so then we got Joe Ranft as Rainn Wilson.
Yes, I really like this casting.
Oh, yeah, and again, basically I was thinking, who could say, "Oh, look at me, I'm a cute little bumblebee."
Rainn Wilson would definitely fit that.
Baby wants pie. It's just thinking, who would do the best Heimlich, and that's kind of how I had. And also, you can do drama really well, which is, kind of from Super. So anyway, then we have Andrew Stan, one of my favorites of the Pixar Brain Trust. Of course, the younger version would be Josh Dallas from Once Upon a Time.
I must say, this casting is pretty impeccable. Let's do the...
Yep, and Pete Docter.
Side thing.
Sure.
Okay, Pete Docter. Pete.
And played by someone who's worked with Pete Docter, the great Bill Hader.
Yes, and this is also pretty spot on.
Yeah, I'm really proud of the casting.
The one thing is, I think Pete Docter is a little taller and lankier than Bill Hader, but
it's an artistic liberty.
Definitely got the face going on,
and he has the voice down packed. That's the main reason. Okay. So let's see. So so these guys again, they're sitting around, they're basically going through the ideas, and here we have the historic moment. So you get what I'm saying about Joe Ranft. Basically, as they're talking over Joe Ranft, they illustrate the scene, basically show the visual development as they're he's boarding a scene as they're described. It's literally boarding a scene to an audience, as much as I get in film, as much as I could imagine it in film. So so as Toy Story actually started. The first thing they did on that whiteboard, Andrew Stan, he made a list of what basically they figured, we're going to make a movie unlike any Disney film, anything we've seen in Disney animation. So what we're going to do, we're going to do the opposite of what Disney does. So they literally put it on a whiteboard. No songs/singing. No songs/singing. No I Want. No Happy Village.
I like how they have to specify that.
No I Want moment, as they do. No I Want moment. No Happy Village. No love story. No villain.
Right. I would argue that Toy Story does have a happy village.
Well, I mean, it's more like an office space.
I guess so. Yeah, yeah.
I'm saying it's like not all like follow. Then oh boy, bad stuff happens.
No, you're right. You're right.
Anyway, so the point is, they outline those things, which of course is how Toy Story started. And then let's see. So while that's happening, and we're just kind of going by a lot of stuff in this scene, just kind of goes quick. All right, let's see. So yeah, okay. Stan makes the list. John Lasseter then describes the characters, and as he describes characters, Joe Ranft gives us a little rudimentary sketch. We see like a really well done sketch kind of happen right in front of the camera. So we see he mentions Tinny. Okay, we're gonna use Tinny from the Tin Toy. You see image of Tinny being drawn. A ventriloquist dummy, image of the ventriloquist dummy. You see, you get the flow. Mm-hmm. Pete Docter points out as he's watching the Tin Toy short, animation makes things look plastic anyway. So this, we should do a full movie about toys instead of just like kind of worrying about. We should put more focus on the toys than we should the humans. Then of course Pete's saying again, Pete's is kind of the inciting incident for a lot of this stuff, where he says, we need to do research, which of course is the grand philosophy of all Pixar films, which is one of my favorite things about them. We need to do research, and this is what I love about all of this, by the way, and all of Act 2. Act 2 has the most fun in it. And the making of Toy Story has all the fun. So basically, they all look at each other. I like a lot of gags in here. They all look at each other, and they all get really excited. And again, as it happened in real life, and I was always charmed. Basically, all my happy commentary memories from Toy Story came alive in this act.
Nice.
So they all look at each other, and we have like this intense, they're gearing up for war almost. Where basically they get in their car, and basically Andrew Stan, he grabs the company credit card.
Oh,
he grabs the company credit card, and they drive very intensely, and it's like, oh boy, like these guys are getting hyped out of my. And the big reveal is Toys R Us, and it's like basically it's like the Nirvana of arriving at Toys R Us. Kind of like again, it's supposed to mirror scenes from the Pixar films. Like it's them arriving at Al's Toy Barn. So Toys R Us, it's like Nirvana. Like, oh. So then basically we have this crazy, awesome sequence that happens. So they're going down aisles, and they're getting inspired left and right. Andrew Stanton and John Lasseter, they're writing down like little notepads.
Yes,
like,
I love it.
Pete Docter, he's playing with the toys, and he's just seeing like how the mechanics work, like how you would animate a toy. He's like looking like kind of like the mobility of the arms and stuff. And he's just kind of, like bouncing a ball and stuff. And like they're all getting funny looks, by the way, as this is going on by parents. They go down the GI Joe aisle, and like they're losing their minds. Yes, that's what. Yeah. Then they're filling up shopping cart after shopping cart, like 4 shopping carts filled with toys and all sorts of toys. Like they're like on a shopping spree. They go buy the potato. There are tons of potato heads put in the cart, by the way. It's like a lot of Mr. Potato Heads. Let's see. Then this is my favorite bit from the commentary here. Is like from the section here is where they reach the bucket of soldiers, the bucket of army men, and they look at each other, and they're laughing, practically laughing on the floor. They're just losing their minds, and just like they're actually trying to write something. They're like, oh, God, it's perfect. And they're geeking out about it. Like, yes, and like if you were a little army man, you were in this bucket. It was just they lost their minds. So again, that's like all that fun, and then basically we cut from like them laughing hysterically and just getting some funny looks from people. Okay, let's review. Let's cut back to the little going around sequence. So basically, Andrew Stan, he summarizes the and Andrew Stan, again, he kind of goes by, again, this is illustrated by Joe Ranft. Andrew Stan is telling the stories, Joe Ranft is kind of showing it to us, summarizes the initial pass on Toy Story, which is the Tin Toy version. Okay, basically we follow Tin Toy, we follow Tinny from and again, this is interesting. Originally, they were going to show the production of a toy in the Toy Story universe. You're going to see him being made in the factory, going from the factory. Again, maybe some Toy Story 4 fodder. I don't know. Point is, you're going to see him from production to sale. Then we're going to do, again, kind of the Lotso stuff. He gets lost at a rest stop, and he's on his way to find his owner again. Along the way, he meets a ventriloquist dummy. The two get on an adventure, and in the end, they end up in a preschool.
Now, is this the evil Woody?
Not yet. We're almost there.
Okay.
The ventriloquist dummy turns into Woody. So, point is, they end up in a preschool where they'll constantly be played with by children. Hooray! We then epically is kind of the word to describe like a lot. Driving in the car and everything. And now they print it out. It's like, oh boy, we're so excited. They print out the script, and then they hand it to Jeffrey Katzenberg, and then dot. Yeah, I'm not feeling it, guys.
Oh no! Oh God!
Then then they're walking out there. That we were kind of repeating a quicker version of the sequence of them adjusting. So it's then like a moment of pause goes by, like they're in that little group again. Andrew Stanton and John Lasseter look at each other. And I love this moment too from the making of. Look at each other and they have like this like a like dot dot dot. They look at each other and they get excited because they have the same idea. A buddy picture. A buddy picture. Because that's the thing they didn't have in the first one. These two weren't friends from the beginning. They weren't like the enemy turned friend thing from the beginning. It's like, yeah, and they run and they find they find Joe and they find Pete and they talk a buddy picture. Yeah. So then they're spitballing like the new potential, all this potential, like, yeah, enemy turned friends. That's how you do it, like the old classic movies. Yeah. Then we see the design phase. Like, you see all these images of like proto Tinny and of Tinny the ventriloquist dummy, all sorts of designs. They realize, wait a minute, guys, Tinny wouldn't be the new favorite toy. He's an old school toy. He's painted. Like, no kid would want to, like, if we're gonna do this buddy thing, one toy has to get jealous of another. He would not be jealous of Tinny. No toy would be jealous of Tinny. So then they realize, yeah, we need something like an old versus new dynamic. And then they happen upon a drawing of Woody as a cowboy. And they're kind of enamored by this. Wait a minute. Who drew this? And they go to Bud Lucky. They go to the guy who drew this. One of the 5 animators hired a picture at the time. And Bud Lucky, of course, looks a little something like this. Oh, no, it's Pete Docter. It's a little different, Pete Docter.
Sorry.
No, it's fine.
A lot of tabs.
Yes. Bud Lucky. And Bud Lucky's cast as Bo Bridges.
Pretty impeccable, I think.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, there's just a quick thing where they asked Bud Lucky, Bud, where'd you come up with this idea, making him a cowboy? It looks great. Well, I just figured you said old versus new. What about, kind of the old West, the new frontier? And then they kind of got the idea, yeah, cowboy, what's modern? Spaceman, cowboy, spaceman. Yes! So then we see, the designs and the sculptings being made and scanned in. Basically they sculpt something, then like they draw lines on Bill Reeves, played by Seth Green. You saw him last time, bearded Seth Green. He's basically tracing him. I think it's like a quick sequence, just seeing like the pieces coming together. Pete Docter, he's putting the test animation together based on Bill Reeves scans them in. Then when the scanned models, Pete Docter will animate those models. So again, it's very, very fluid. There's like a list of names for Buzz Lightyear as they're coming up with, all the Tempest from Morph, Lunar Larry, all that stuff. And they did, and basically we have the initial test footage from 1992 with the jerk Woody. So it started.
Okay.
He gets some stuff behind the desk. He becomes more jerk-like as it goes on.
I mean, to be fair, I do think in the final film, Woody's still kind of a jerk.
No, but he's a likable. He's very likable.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this is now we're in like 1992, 93. We're in 1992 where he shows Katzenberg they show Katzenberg the test. He says, lose the dummy lines. And we got to show Jeffrey Katzenberg did have some good ideas. He says, lose the dummy lines and then change the name of the spaceman. Tempest from Morph. I don't like it. So let's see. So John Lasseter has we see like on his desk or something, he has like Buzz circled on the list of names. Buzz for like Buzz Aldrin. It says, I like Buzz, and he's like kind of speed and time, all that sort of stuff. And of course, is a thing from John Lasseter's past. Like of all the toys we've seen in his office in the previous scenes, he has the Casper doll, which of course was the inciting incident. John Lasseter grew up with a Casper doll, pull-string Casper doll, which was his favorite toy growing up. And he pulled the string, and he got the idea. Okay, let's make him a pull-string cowboy. There you go. So anyway, 1992-93, John Lasseter shows Jeffrey Katzenberg the Tom Hanks test footage. Like the whole like you're eating the car, don't eat the car. You're basically talking about I saw him in Turner and Hooch and A League of Their Own. He's the guy we need for this. I'm gonna show him the test footage.
This was before like Oscar winner Tom Hanks.
Yeah, they got him at just the right time.
So
let's see. So then Jeffrey Katzenberg then calls. And we see a progression over time. We're just going to fast forward to the timeline here. Jeffrey Katzenberg, he calls about getting Tim Allen for Buzz Lightyear because that's what Jeffrey Katzenberg brought. They didn't have Tim Allen until Jeffrey Katzenberg because he was working with them on Home Improvement.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's see. So then Tom Schumacher. Now we saw the good side of Jeffrey Katzenberg. Now we're going to see the bad side. So Tom Schumacher is delivering notes in kind of a little montage here. He's delivering note after note and basically kind of almost like the mail guy. Now we see like basically from notes being delivered to like meetings being called of John Lasseter in a room with Jeffrey Katzenberg, and basically Katzenberg kind of saying, we got to push edge, John. We got to push edginess. We want to. You guys want to do a movie unlike any Disney movie.
Are you sure this isn't Michael Eisner we're talking about?
Oh, Eisner's a lot worse than Katzenberg. Come on. Anyway. But no, it's just like, Katzenberg saying, you know what, John, you got to do something a little unlike Disney. And I like that nonconformist streak in you, John. But you gotta spice it up a little. You gotta make it edgy. You gotta push it. You gotta do something that's gonna basically play with the irreverence you're going for. I see what you're going for. It's basically like Jeffrey's trying to help, but he's trying to make DreamWorks into Pixar. He's trying to make Pixar into DreamWorks, I should say.
Right.
No, that was Katzenberg's fault. Again, not entirely evil, but he pushed it in the wrong. He almost killed it. That's the thing. He almost killed Toy Story. So basically saying, toys with attitude, because people are going to see toys and think, oh, it's going to be cutesy, but then they're going to see they have attitude and they're adults in like this office space environment you got going on here. That's what you got to do, John. I do that. So anyway, again, very much like a salesman, he's kind of selling John on this. And then John is very uncomfortable with this, and with the team, he's just saying, and they're Disney. I know what they're doing, guys. We got to give it a shot. We're just going to follow notes on this. We're very lucky to be here. We're just going to follow notes and make it the best we can, right? Yeah. Anyway, so let's see. So we then basically we're kind of speeding to the big Black Friday of it all here, where Joe Rance and company are putting the story reels together, and they make a tape. And of course, they sent this tape around, this VHS tape of the story reel, and the story reel went to when Woody throws Buzz out the window.
Okay.
Bear in mind, he actually threw him out the window instead of in the movie where it was an accident. That was live and learn. So the point is, they make a tape, they send it in. So now time passes, and we see the tape being received by Jeffrey Katzenberg, Tom Schumacher, and we don't have anyone cast. I'm going to reveal who this is in the third act. It's with mysterious Roy Disney making him enigmatic. Basically, it's like the guy with the actual Disney name received.
And this is where Roy Disney is like, he's not like the laughing stock in the studio. He's actually got some clout behind him.
That's what I'm saying. Like Roy Disney's in shadow. Like Roy Disney is in shadow. Basically, I kept the other Disney executives in shadow.
Do I even know this casting?
No, you don't know it yet.
Okay.
Well, actually, no, you do, but you've forgotten it. So
yes, I have forgotten it. Yes,
we don't have it right now, but you know who it is. But
okay.
Anyway, so the mysterious Roy Disney, they all received the tape, and then of course we know what happens here. But
he's like lurking in the background, like Jensen from Sorcerer's Apprentice.
Yes, and he's got the fanciest office out of everyone. That's kind of like my little gag on. Anyway, so Pixar is in, like, again, time passes and Pixar receives an invitation to the Disney lot, which of course John Lasseter was excommunicated from.
Mm-hmm.
So again, that's a big painful location for John Lasseter to return to. So it's November 1993.
Oh boy.
We have a very nervous walk back to the studio. Again, John Lasseter, you can see him getting a little anxious, kind of walking back to the studio where he was fired from. They are then shown the footage. There's a big screening with the executives. Again, Jeffrey Katzenberg, Tom Schumacher are there. Like, you can see those guys. Everyone else is in shadow. Peter Snyder's there, but he's in shadow. And Roy Disney might...
Is this like the men in the poorly lit rooms who secretly control the universe from the Avengers?
They have the World Security Council, but yes. Essentially, yes, but Roy's not in the room. Roy's somewhere else.
Okay. I'm just kidding.
But yeah, essentially, all the points, like, those are the two guys. We know those two guys. So the point is, they're screening in front of everyone, and you see, and this to me is the most fascinating moment from the Pixar story for me every time I watch it. So I wanted to hit on this so well. John Lasseter, and this is the side of John Lasseter I really wanted to explore in this movie. The side of John Lasseter we don't see in the public. We see like the friendly John Lasseter, which we know and love, but there is a side of John Lasseter we don't see that often. This is like the side right here where we see him feel embarrassed and horrified at what he's seeing on screen. This is John Lasseter's worst nightmare, returning to Disney, the place where it's like, I want to impress those guys. I want to show them the storytelling I can, like what we can do with animation. My dream come true should be this moment, but no, it's horrible, and I was complicit in making it horrible. So he glances to Jeffrey Katzenberg and the shadowed executives behind him, and Jeffrey's just looking like he's ashamed, like he's nodding. And he gives like they catch eyes for a moment, and he looks at John.
Oh God!
And just like it's like that. So then we have Jeffrey. We basically cut to like in Jeffrey's office with Tom, and Jeffrey's he's on the phone with Roy Disney, like a conference call or something. He's asking, Roy, what did you think? Oh, God, it's so bad. I've been fast-forwarding through these tapes. It'll never end.
God.
Which is what he said. That's what he said to him on the phone. Like, fast-forward through these tapes. They're horrible. And then Jeffrey's asking, after the call ends, he's asking Tom, why is it so terrible? What happened? And Tom's pointing out, Jeffrey, they followed all your notes. They followed all the notes. It's
right.
The only thing I can figure, Jeffrey, is it's not their movie anymore. We took them out of it. It's not their movie anymore. And then Jeff, he's mentioned, Peter really wants you to pull the plug on this, Jeffrey. What are we gonna do? And of course, this is Jeffrey Katzenberg again. He's helpful, but at the same time, he's such a mixed bag, Jeffrey Katzenberg, right here, where he's basically
That's what makes him a fun villain.
I know, because he has good intentions, but he's going about it so wrong. Because right here, basically, and again, this is the thing I want to stress here, because Jeffrey Katzenberg and Peter Schneider really kind of at each other's throats, and he brought Peter Schneider on this. It's fascinating. He says, "Well, what do we do, Jeffrey?" And he says, "We're not shutting down. This movie's going to get done no matter what. I don't care what it takes. We're making this movie. I know this is the future, Tom. This movie's getting made."
Nice.
So again, he's sticking by Toy Story, but he's willing to maul it if it means he's willing to pulverize it. It's like this thing, if it's beaten and bloodied and bruised, it's getting the theaters. Like we're making
overprotective parent.
Exactly. He's saying we're going to make that. Tom, I have no intention of not making that deadline in 1995. So the brain trust, we see him pacing very nervously in the hallway and just kind of echoing to each other. Oh God, it's so bad. We need to fix this, man. So then Jeffrey Katzenberg summons them into the big old scary table, the big old scary conference room. Boy, oh boy. Let's see. So he lays down the law, threatening to, and as I haven't really, he threatens to lay off like half the employees at Pixar and move them. Like again, this is like a month before Christmas. You guys gonna have to move closer to Disney because you don't know what you're doing. You guys need help, and we're meeting that release date no matter what. And again, it's looking really, really dour, and everyone's looking really nervous. And John, oh boy, here we go. And I love that we have two really big Katzenberg altercations here. We have three Katzenberg altercations. This is the first one. Where basically, John, he basically does what Jeffrey Katzenberg did to him when they first met in the first act here, where basically he stands up and he targets Jeffrey in the room, and he says, "We have a lot invested in this, Jeffrey." And I guess just calling him Jeffrey. Jeffrey, we have a lot invested in this movie. I'm going to make you a deal. Give us 2 weeks. We can turn this around. We need to rework the story. We got our wires crossed a lot. We can fix this. You have to trust that we can fix this, just like we trusted you that we would make this together. What do you say? A moment of pause goes by. Jeffrey again kind of looks to cut a Lasseter's jib, and he just says, again, it gives him a chance. Says, all right, fine. 2 weeks. Boy, oh boy. So then Steve Jobs, I guess that's like, oh boy, oh boy. Steve Jobs, meanwhile, he's telling Ed that he's considering selling Pixar to Microsoft after this is going on, which is true. It's like, oh boy, he was really, after this meeting, Steve Jobs was very worried about the state of Pixar because, again, if the plug gets pulled in this movie, if this movie doesn't get done, we're done. Essentially is what he echoes to Ed, and Ed's telling him, listen, have faith, Steve. Have faith in these guys. They know what they're doing. They can make this movie. And Steve, again, who's thinking about bowing out at the time, we're going to see Steve's arc with that as it goes on. So, ticking clock. As that's going on. So
Speaking of ticking clock, are you close to wrapping up?
Yeah, I'm close to wrapping up.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so ticking clock's going on. So they're playing the tape. They're playing the bad Black Friday tape, the bad reel. They're realizing, okay, we'll take a note of the problems in the Disney notes, which essentially says, hey, do all the stuff you said you weren't going to do when you made the list earlier on. It says, oh, we're throwing that out. Terrible. So they toss out half of Disney's notes. They're focusing on okay, guys, what we need to fix in this? Woody. Woody's character is deeply flawed. We got to make him likable. Okay. They come up with the diluted Buzz idea. We see him reboarding like crazy. Essentially, the scene you're seeing before you here, basically, the reboarding stuff. They're reboarding like crazy. It's like it's snowing drawings for a moment. All the paper flying in the room. They hire Lee Unkrich.
Okay, hold on.
Oh yeah, sorry. I think the order's a little off on that, but But the point is, they hire Lee Unkrich. We'll get to him. We hire Lee Unkrich. There we go. Yeah, so Lee Unkrich, played by Ed Helms.
Appropriately enough.
I want to say is the best casting in this, but
was this picture taken just to be like, hey, look how similar we look to each other?
Essentially, yes.
Oh God. Okay.
There was another one too, but anyway, yeah. So, yes. Okay, let's see. So So basically, this is then like in a 2-week period. Here's what they're doing, like kind of get the story working before they're working on the movie. It's like, they hire Lee Unkers. Lee Unkers as the editor. And Lee Unkers was an excellent editor, which is why he directed Toy Story 3. He puts a new reel together of all the new ideas they got worked up, and they get the okay. We then cut to Disney. Disney gives them the okay. Okay, go forward, make the movie. So okay, now they're boarding. They're boarding the Green Army Man sequence. That was just the thing earlier on. Yeah, they're right there. They're boarding the Green Army Man sequence. That was the first sequence animated. While we intercut between it being boarded and it being animated. So Pete Docter, he has like the Bill Hader's Pete Docter. He's wearing the tenor shoes nailed to the board so he can walk like Green Army Man, which is hilarious. Again, doing the test for the animation, we see multiple plates spinning here. Pete Docter's animating Woody. We see him kind of use a makeshift rag doll. He has like a Fred Flintstone head and he has like a raggedy body and has a head in real life. They're Joe Rant and Andrew Stan, they're spitballing ideas of like kind of all this torture stuff Sid could do to toys. Like, oh yeah, like a combat car, like instead of a GI Joe, blow them up, and magnifying glass in the toys. Yeah, we used to do that to our toys. Yeah. We see Pizza Putt turn the pizza plant, like Andrew Stanley kind of give himself like I could have had a V8, like stupid. How did I not think of that Pizza Planet? Darn it. We see the origin of the scooter. Pete Docter has to get animation, to like the show animation. He has to get all across the studio. And again, it's a deadline. A lot of time passing here. And he basically he tapes like a box to a scooter. And he basically puts the animation stuff so they can put it on the all the hard drives and like all the flash, the flash drives, the floppy disk and everything in these little baskets. So he can deliver them to the animation by scooter.
Mm-hmm.
Steve Jobs is walking by and he's seeing, man, it's really coming together. The animation's being completed. We see sequences being completed. They're all laughing at Doug Sweetland. Doug Sweetland, of course, who is played by, let's show Doug Sweetland. There we go, Doug Sweetland. And he is played by KJ Apa from Riverdale.
Okay.
It's a decent likeness. And essentially, there's like a moment again while this is going on. It's not just like a beat the clock sort of thing. It's like they are still having fun here. Where they're watching the scene where he opens Buzz's helmet. It's like my eyeballs covered in sucker in their sockets. That scene go on, where they lost their minds at that scene. There's this laughing hysterically at it. And again, they're still having some fun here. John Lasseter's on the phone with Thinkway Toys saying, "Listen, guys, you're really gonna want." It's like Marty McFly on the phone with
yeah.
Chuck Berry's brother, that whole conversation. Like, listen, you're gonna want these toys in time for Christmas. Or make them 12-inch. Like the figures in the movies. Trust me, guys. Fine. Okay, let's see. We're almost there. So Lee puts it together. It ends with like it's like, oh, we're falling. It's not flying. It's falling with style. Then kind of the last thing of the making of is we see Pete Docter animating the Luxo opening as like the last thing in the animation of like, okay, we have a cool opening. It kind of signifies us as a company, the Luxo lamp jumping on the eye in Pixar.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we have the big scene, big Destiny scene here, where it's 1994, right before Toy Story, a year before Toy Story comes out. They're at a cafe. They're at the Hidden Cafe. And this is a very famous meeting. So basically, they completed the movie. They have no idea how it's going to do. All their hopes and dreams are built upon the success of this movie. They're all hoping for the best. They're all speculating the future of Pixar. Like, oh boy, if we can do more movies, what kind of stuff will we talk about? And they're spitballing ideas like bugs, monsters, fish, which of course would be Nemo, and Wall-E. And we get all these fanciful ideas. And John Lasseter says, you know what, guys, we're showing them as friends coming about and so on and so forth. John Lasseter is very proud that look, guys, I'm just proud we finished Toy Story. We did the first full-length computer animated film, fulfilled my lifelong goal. The rest, as far as I'm concerned, the rest is just cake. It's just cake and icing on top. Let's ride this for all the good stuff. Okay, so we then see 1995. John Lasseter and Andrew Stanton visit Jeffrey Katzenberg at DreamWorks.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes. So they visit Jeffrey Katzenberg at DreamWorks, and essentially here we get like a little bit of exposition that they congratulate each other, like, oh, congratulations on the movie getting finished, and John Lasseter's offering his sympathy about him, being fired from Disney, saying, my sympathies, I was fired from Disney, you were fired from Disney, I understand exactly.
Right.
And again, I'm paralleling their characters right now. I'm just showing like how similar these guys are deep down. It's like, yeah, we were both going to let go from Disney. And it's just, well, guys, I'm sure you did an excellent job in the movie. Again, like no hard feelings about Black Friday, essentially, is kind of what's said in the scene. It worked out for the best. We made the best movie we could. Movies come out, they all like it. So what next? And here's the big moment here. Jeffrey Katzenberg is asking, so what next? Andrew Stanton and John Lasseter kind of pitching the rudimentary Bugs Life pitch and saying, "Oh yeah, we're gonna do a movie about Bugs. It's gonna be fun."
Oh God!
And then there's like a pause here where Jeffrey Katzenberg, he takes it in, like, yeah, we're gonna have all this fun in this movie. That Bugs with a little camera and everything. We kind of seeing like what it looks like from a Bug's eye point of view. It's gonna be great. There's a big pause, and this is exactly how it happened in real life. John, the only thing Jeffrey Katzenberg said in response: "When's it coming out?"
Oh man. Okay.
Hey guys, when's it coming out? So we see I'm building to that scene. I think that I'll end it there for Act 2 once I get to the payoff of that. All right. So, okay, Christmas. We see just to address the success of Toy Story 95. We see Christmas chaos. Basically, people again, kind of like another Toys R Us sequence where people are going, they're stealing Buzz. They're not stealing. They're almost stealing Buzz and Woody's. They're taking Buzz and Woody's off the shelf, and Buzz Lightyear's sold out instantly, and like people are clamoring for the toys. And this basically big success. Our guys get an invite to the Oscars. Joe Ranft said, "Hey, let's rent the Oscar Mayer Weenie Mobile." Basically, he drives up. Hey guys, I got us a ride. And this is true. They ride to the Oscars every year in the Oscar Mayer Weenie Mobile.
Oh man!
And I inferred that Joe Ranft had the idea because he's the prankster and the jokester of the Pixar group. So he's like, "Hey guys, it'd be kind of cool. Like, we want Oscars. We want to be winners, don't we? Or wieners in this case, yeah." So then John Lasseter walks up on stage, Buzz and Woody, and it's a great moment where of course, but basically this scene unfolds. We don't see the speech, but we see like walk up with these two guys.
Mm-hmm.
And he's basically at the peak of Pixar success, the Special Achievement Oscar, which I'll remind you, Walt Disney got the same exact thing. Well, he'll get the Seven Dwarves, the statue. The point is, like, it was a Special Achievement Oscar of some kind. Steve Jobs deflates kind of the cloud nine of Pixar here by telling him, "John, there's something to tell you about. I heard that DreamWorks, they're doing a movie called Ants."
Oh boy!
John Lasseter's in shock. Like, what?
Oh God!
John Lasseter, oh boy, here we go. John Lasseter visits Jeffrey Katzenberg. It's raining outside. Thunder crashing, rain pouring. and again, this is pulled from real life, folks. John Lasseter, he visits Jeffrey in the rain. And, in his office in the rain. At DreamWorks, it's John Lasseter in DreamWorks. It's kind of cool in itself. He says, he's just so hurt and so innocent. This is basically where John Lasseter gets the harsh rule of business in this scene. Jeffrey, he literally said, "How could you do it, Jeffrey?" And I add a little bit of this. Jeffrey Katzenberg saying he's starting to give him the PR response, which Jeffrey Katzenberg just actually gave him in real life. He just said this, but John Lasseter just inferred this. But basically, Jeffrey Katzenberg, the way I have it here is that, "Well, look, John, all these rumors here about us stealing the idea," and he kind of stops himself. He sees John just looking so crestfallen, just like being so innocent. He says, "John, look, you have to understand this. It's just business. It's nothing personal. They threw us away. That was their mistake. It's our game. We're building our own empires here, John. All right." And he's trying to help in a way. He's just trying to tell John, like, "Hey, look, it happens. We're going our own ways here. I'm using this to get back at Disney. Like essentially you did with Toy Story. You outshined them, and now they want you desperately. I'm going to get what I want. I had a hand in making Toy Story. I should have a hand in another computer animated film. We were there. We made history together. I saw the vision. I deserve something, John, just like you deserve something. You got the Oscar. I'm getting the future laid out."
Mm-hmm.
John Lasseter leaves just puzzled and shocked. Steve Jobs and John Lasseter. Here's the ending of Act 2. John Lasseter and Steve Jobs get a call from Jeffrey Katzenberg. We cut the Katzenberg on the other end of the phone call in his office, just kind of making them the famous deal. There we go. Making the famous deal. Saying, guys, basically saying, hey, we have Prince of Egypt. Basically saying, we will can Ants. We won't do Ants if you allow Prince of Egypt to be released before Bug's Life comes out. And here's what happens. I was so fascinated by this in real life. John Lasseter, after this deal was announced, after he had that scene with Jeffrey Katzenberg, and then he gets this call from Jeffrey Katzenberg a little later, like maybe a couple of days later. Steve's in the room. John Lasseter, he's just so angry and betrayed in this scene. He's really angry with him. After he says, "What do you say, boys?" And John just hangs up the phone, slams it down, and he's just steaming. And we've never seen John Lasseter like that. Steve Jobs, we see like a wide shot. Steve Jobs she's shocked by it. He's never seen John like this. He kind of pats him on the shoulder and just comforts him. that's the end of Act 2.
All right, I like it. I like it. Good point to end off on. All right. So I guess, Dragon, the last thing to do is to give kind of teasers for Act 3. I shall start. Act 3 is really all about kind of putting everything into context with Walt's life. It's very much. I'm going to say this much. It basically starts at the opening of Disneyland, so it kind of bypasses the construction of Disneyland and everything. Kind of flash forwards about 5 years or so. So it's about 10 years of his life from the opening of Disneyland until his death in 1966, so about 11 years of his life. Of course, we are going to get some, the resolution to the I Work storyline. We're going to get some more stuff with the studio drama. Most importantly, Act 3 is going to focus more in on, it's going to really zero in on Roy and Walt, so the Michael Keaton and Ryan Gosling of it all. And, of course, we're going to have Ryan Gosling as an old man, which should be interesting to, describe just from a performance perspective. And, of course, how I'm going to deal with Walt Disney's death, all that good stuff. So, yeah. All right. And Dragon, tease up your Act 3.
All right. So I made an alteration. So Act 3 is just going to kind of include all. Sorry. Sorry. So, okay. Yeah. So Act 3 is essentially going to include Toy Story 2, the full making of. Well, not the full make. It's going to include. We're going to cover Toy Story 2. We're going to cover kind of the rise of Pixar, and of course, we're going to link up with kind of the current Circle 7 problem of it all here, and that's the present. We're going to link up with all of that. And let me build it up like this. So, okay. Justin Swain as the young John Lasseter, his innocence kind of died in that scene. So that's the last we see of Justin Swain. So now we're going to get the Stephen Root John Lasseter going forward. We're going to build to him. We're going to build to him, and he's just going to be he's going to be ushered in, and yeah, Stephen Root John Lasseter. We're going to see him kind of take over. As he's playing kind of the current day John Lasseter, we're going to see kind of the young and innocent John Lasseter's gone. Now we're just going to have kind of the wizened but still relatively innocent John Lasseter. The nice guy we all know and love John Lasseter being. Kind of see John Lasseter's going to go through some stuff. There's still there are two bad things for John Lasseter. Of course, the Circle 7 thing, which is the current dilemma, but there's going to be one other really devastating thing that's going to happen to John Lasseter in this next thing. It's going to show you how strong a guy this is. Like how again he's going to go through like a loss like Disney went through.
Okay.
It's going to be very interesting to see. It's going to end on a really high note. It's going to be we're going to get to the welcome of Pixar being welcomed to the fold, because Disney's kind of kicked them around these first two acts. We're going to see them kind of be welcomed to the fold in a grand way. So it's going to Act 3 is kind of like the big Pixar being threatening Disney and then being welcomed by it. That's kind of Act 3 in a whole.
All right. Also coming up on Talking Mr. Banks this month, folks, we are going to be starting Fantasia month very soon, which will be full-blown retrospective podcasts on Fantasia, Fantasia 2000, The Sorcerer's Apprentice, yes, the Nick Cage one. We're also going to have a special grab bag podcast talking about all kinds of different Walt Disney shorts that are themed to music. And then finally, we will end things off on a Fantasia 3 pitch. Oh, I've got some really ambitious stuff for my Fantasia 3, Dragon. Ooh, boy. All right, folks. So thank you for joining us on this pitch-tacular installment, and see you again next time.
Goodbye.